I'm not claiming that the intent of people is to mooch off the system. The result of people is that they may be a net draw on benefits rather than a net contributor to the economy of the United States or to the culture of the United States, because I want people who are coming here who actually have some sort of belief in, say, American-style freedoms. I don't think everybody from all over the world has the same ideology.
Sam Seder and Emma Vigeland of the Majority Report take a look at some footage of Ben Shapiro doing one of these sort of Jubilee round tables, these sort of circular debates. It's pretty enlightening. I think it really, the one person they focus on in particular really kind of skewers Ben Shapiro just by remaining calm and asking him to clarify his positions. Let's take a look at this together. I want to chime in with my comments in addition to theirs, and then I want to ask you what you think of the comments.
Shapiro reads off something about immigration. He sits down, and the first thing the guy says is like, "I'm not happy with Harris's seemingly rightward turn towards immigration," but then begins to engage Ben Shapiro, and here's what happens.
I don't believe that it's an economic benefit to the United States to bring in a low-skill, low-education labor pool that is drawing significantly from public benefits, for example. And there are very good data to show that there's huge reliance on, say, emergency rooms, educational facilities. Based on the Center for Immigration Studies, there's a net cost to low-wage, low-skill immigration coming into the country.
You're in favor with emergency rooms just deterring people based on what they look like or what might be perceived as someone with a lack of citizenship?
No, I'm very much in favor of limiting the amount of illegal immigration to zero, and then allowing a fair bit of legal immigration.
So you're more interested in decreasing the pool of people and population in this country so there are less emergency room visits, or are you more in favor of actually documenting these people so we're able to track like exactly who is coming through? Like I'm kind of lacking what your argument is.
It's not about number. It's about the people who are coming in. I believe that everybody who comes into this country should come in through a legal mechanism, and that the United States ought to be able to select the people who are coming in who are the best, brightest, and most useful to the American population, because that is the prerogative of any nation.
So do you think that the way that we do allow people in through our legalization process, especially with how much egregious obstacles people have to go through, might incentivize people to come through non-legal means?
I mean,
on average, it takes about 10 years for somebody to gain citizenship in this country. And if somebody is fleeing political persecution, I really find it interesting how conservatives always like to talk about the response.
What I found fascinating about that moment, and if I had any note, and I think this guy is exceptional at what he's doing, I probably should replace me. I don't think it could address it better than he's about to. But Shapiro has no idea what he's talking about when he says, do you think the incredible hurdles that are created for legal immigration in this country incentivize people to come here illegally? Shapiro's just like, what? I mean, he either doesn't understand how the question is phrased, which it doesn't seem like, but I don't think he knows anything.
No, it's a gotcha. You know, it puts its finger right on the right-wing assumption of like, brown people south of the border think it looks pretty good up here. They come up here and cross our border illegally so they can soak up all of our free stuff and free money. And, and then just live here and kind of suck off the American teat, which is completely ignores so much of the story of why immigration is an issue in the first place. I mean, there are problems. Anyway, I'll let this go.
About the immigration process whatsoever.
Because all the stuff about the process and the legality is just there as window dressing for the right. 100%. And they don't want immigration at all. Or I would also argue there's another class of right-winger that likes immigration to be and legal immigration to be as difficult as possible, because they know there will be some migration and people coming into this country seeking a better life or to make money, and that when they're when they're working for bosses, they can pay them lower wages, no
or
benefits.
Easily exploited.
They don't get, have to pay for their health care, right? It allows for them to be exploited. And if they get a little bit too, they're not compliant enough, oh, why don't I just call ICE on your ass? I mean, there are bosses that say that. And I just also want to note, Shapiro cites about the drain on our hospital system from the Center for Immigration Studies. That was founded by a eugenicist.
Yes.
There is it's just they have nothing except the racism, and then they build up this fortress of details to make it seem like they're making some real highfalutin point. But that's all.
That's a great comment. There's people will say, well, the studies show, and this has been clearly documented. It's studies done by, like Emma said here, a eugenicist, right? They dress up this stuff in official language. Oh, a report was done. Some jackass wrote a report and filed it somewhere, and now it's a documented thing that they refer to as proof of things.
There's a lot more data that suggests that the net is a positive in terms of tax dollars that get paid into U.S. coffers by immigrants who are undocumented and will not see things like Social Security benefits as a function of all the money they have put into these tax coffers. But let's continue here. And I should also say, what constitutes most useful? When Georgia, several years ago, I can't remember, was it 8 years ago now, instituted a policy of severe punishment of immigrants being hired. A ton of Georgia peaches stood on those trees and just dropped, and it was the agricultural industry. It was like, we need these people. We need these people. So, what constitutes most useful for Ben Shapiro? I think it may be actually different from what constitutes most useful. Go ahead.
On average, it takes about 10 years for somebody to gain citizenship in this country. And if somebody is fleeing political persecution, I really find it interesting how conservatives always like to talk about the response to certain behaviors instead of what the root cause is. When oftentimes United States foreign policy is what creates the destabilization of countries, which is why people try to come to places where they can't get economic benefit. Your employee, Matt Walsh, was kind of schooled on this with Ryan Grimm, where he talked about specifically Haitian policy, where the government of Haiti has been destabilized over and over again by Western imperial nations. So that those citizens are trying to flee something with political persecution.
Is it your contention that anytime there's a destabilized nation across the world, even if the United States had a hand in it, then we then have a moral obligation to take in every citizen of that country who wishes to flee?
No, I think that's a huge straw man. I'm not saying that every single person from a destabilized country needs to take refuge in the United States, but I think it's important to add that context. So you can understand why people are coming here.
That's a case for a different foreign policy. That's not a case for an immigration policy.
The idea is people are coming in here to mooch off of our emergency rooms or mooch off of our social services,
no, I don't
which
think
is just not true at all.
I mean, that's your big contention. That is not my contention.
Okay.
My contention is, I'm not claiming that the intent of people is to mooch off the system. The result of people is that they may be a net draw on benefits rather than a net contributor to the economy of the United States or to the culture of the United States, because I want people who are coming here who actually have some sort of belief in, say, American-style freedoms. I don't think everybody from all over the world has the same ideology.
Pause it right there. Wait a second. Pause it for one second.
Yeah, did you see all those little flags go up? I'm not sure what that means, but it's literally a bunch of red flags.
All right, so he pivots because he knows when he starts talking about and if you notice, I think he knows this is a lie, because he said that his, tax thing said they are a greater draw on welfare and emergency rooms. Well, that may be true than your average, and I don't know how this is measured, but it's conceivable because they're not allowed into certain systems like Obamacare in certain areas. And so they may go to the emergency room. I would imagine if you're an undocumented immigrant, you're far less likely to have access to even health insurance. So that may be true. But when he gets into net, when he talks about taxes, he sort of runs through it because he wants to talk about, the cultural aspects now, right? So it's not really about who's most useful. It's about the culture. And what culture is he talking about? What culture is it that we have in America? Is it hardworking? Because there isn't a shred of data that doesn't suggest that on net, migrants work significantly, undocumented migrants work significantly harder than your average American. There's just, there's no question about it. You've got people working 2-3 jobs so they can send home a couple of dollars to their families. So what culture is it? Is it comedy culture? Like, what culture is it that he's talking about?
The culture of people's blood. That's the blood that's being poisoned. And he moves to culture when he's confronted about foreign policy.
Exactly.
Because if you were to ask him, like Ben Shapiro, what would you change about our foreign policy so maybe we don't displace people and we don't destabilize countries, he would have no answer to that, because he's, for example, been saying that the United States has been too restrained and should be allowing Israel to kill as many Palestinians as possible. So he wants to have it both ways. He wants a belligerent foreign policy, at least as it relates to Israel, but for there not to be blowback and displacement that could affect the great empire. And so his arrogance is on display by this guy.
Or to the culture of the United States, because I want people who are coming here who actually have some sort of belief in, say, American-style freedoms. I don't think everybody from all over the world has the same ideology.
So you're aligning with Nick Fuentes that, like, a lot of these people just don't have the exact same culture. These people don't have culture and they can't come here. I know that you're making that face. I know that he's an individual that you guys obviously disagree. He's somebody that's like increases calls for violence against people of certain communities. I'm not saying that you're
Nick
identical,
Fuentes,
but I'm saying on this issue particular,
he literally makes videos trying to stab me. So
see this disdain in your face, though? Like, this is the type of disdain I have for the exact ideology that you guys are in agreement.
I don't understand why there is anything wrong with the idea that you ought to screen people
can assimilate
for their viewpoint. Of course people can assimilate, but you ought to select from a pool of people who are most likely to assimilate. That doesn't mean that everybody has it. Do you think everybody on Earth has an equivalent ideology? Try and get into the country? We shouldn't screen for ideology at all.
How would you screen for ideology?
Pause it. I mean, I'm glad he's asking this question. Like, what an ideology? Now, what is that? Like, what we have, perhaps the most polarized country we've had probably since the Civil War, in terms of at least ideologically speaking. I wonder, like, what ideology? What's the ideology that sits outside of where we're at?
Terror.
You can't have a valid, sort of like a communist sneak into the country. I got news for you. They're going to be very disappointed when they find out what a system we have. If they're looking for communal property, like, I'm curious as to what ideologies he's talking about.
But this is what
is it religious fundamentalism?
But yeah, I mean, like but the certain kind of religion, this is when racists knew they couldn't basically talk about black people and say the N-word in that way or whatever. They moved to, well, there's a problem with the fathers and they've got to pull their pants up, and it's this ideology that is a part of the black community. They've got to be responsible for themselves. So he's trying. This guy is connecting him in Fuentes, which
right. That's a good point. Oh, well, it's not the color of their skin. It's their culture.
I mean, he's so offended. Ben Shapiro is a Jewish person, but he's right to point out that their ideology is much more similar than Ben would like to admit to, because it is, even though he says it's about their belief system, we get to pick from a pool of people. He would probably, first of all, that's not a smart way to run an immigration system, but when it comes down to it, it's basically about banning swaths of people from coming into this country from places that he doesn't like, their ideology. But that really probably means Muslim people at the end of the day. And that's still bigotry, Ben.
Try and get into the country? We shouldn't screen for ideology at all.
How would you screen for ideology? Like a basic test to show what people actually value when it comes to attributes?
Sure.
What would that test look like?
I mean, I think that would look very much like a citizenship test.
But this is not determining the ideologies of this person coming in. This is a determination.
I mean, they at least have to understand that
people can actually have.
No, but people would actually have to understand the basic ideology.
How many U.S.-born citizens do you think could pass a citizenship test?
He got timed out. Oh, because that's exactly right. That they already take a citizenship test, you dipshit. They already take a citizenship test. And it's not about their ideology. It's like, can you remember how many states there are and who the first president was? Yeah, right. It's just, Ben Shapiro in 2010 tweeted, Israelis like to build. Arabs like to bomb crap and live in open sewage. This is not a difficult issue. Hashtag settlements rock. So when he talks about, I find that ideology of his extremist belief in Israeli settlements to be problematic. And I will be more generous than Ben Shapiro. I think his ideology is very harmful to the country, and he amplifies it via his platform because he's a popular TV show host or internet show host. I would say I would let people with Ben Shapiro's ideology into this country because unlike him, I'm not authoritarian cracking down on free speech. That's not the kind of filtration system that I would use for immigration.
Damn. Emma laying it down. I can't say I disagree. Ben Shapiro, what are you doing, man? That's a pretty scathing tweet. Even if it was from 2020, it's like, dude, what are you talking about? What do you think of all this? You know, the thing that really sticks out to me is the way that, as Ben Shapiro did, but the right does in general, is when you start to get into the nitty gritty of how their quote unquote policy things aren't going to work, they pivot. What about culture, right? And it's all a baloney culture war that most Americans really don't care much about. I mean, policy's the crux of it, right? Let me know what you think in the comments.